Welcome! Today, we're going to break down the essential practices of ritual purification in Islam. We're talking about wudu, which is the daily ablution, ghusl, the full ritual bath, and a really interesting concession called mesh.
But before we jump into the how-to, we've got to be really clear on what kind of purity we're actually talking about. Because, in this context, it's not just about soap and water. So think of it like this. On one side, you have physical impurity, or Hadath. That's the straightforward stuff, removing actual dirt or grime. But on the other side, you have ritual impurity, or Hadath. Now, this isn't something you can see. It's a spiritual state that kind of puts a pause on certain acts of worship, like prayer. And that's our focus today, how you lift this ritual state to prepare for worship.
All right, let's start with the most common form of purification, wudu. This is the ablution you'd perform multiple times a day before praying, and its foundation is commanded directly in the Quran.
This one verse, this is the bedrock. It lays out the absolute, non-negotiable pillars of wudu. This is the bare minimum, the stuff you have to do for the whole thing to be valid.
So from that verse, scholars have identified 4 absolute essentials. You can think of these as the pillars of wudu. And if you miss even one of them, the entire act is invalid, and you got to start over.
And here they are. First, you wash the face completely. We're talking hairline to chin and from ear to ear. Second, you wash both of your arms, making sure to include the elbows. Third, you wipe your head with wet hands. And fourth, you wash both feet, all the way up to and including the ankles. Simple, direct, and absolutely essential.
Okay, but it's not just about splashing some water around. There are conditions, right? For those 4 pillars to actually count, the water has to physically touch the skin. This means any kind of water-resistant barrier, think wax or even nail polish, that has to be removed first. And I find this detail about beards pretty interesting. If it's sparse, water has to get to the skin. But if it's dense, just washing the surface of the hair is enough.
Now, you can do that bare minimum, and your wudu is perfectly valid. But if you want to take it to the next level, you can follow the recommended practices of the Prophet Muhammad, known as Sunnahs. These aren't mandatory, but they're seen as adding a lot of spiritual reward. We're talking about things like saying Bismillah at the start, washing each part 3 times, and always washing the right side before the left.
And once you're all done, it's a really beautiful practice to recite this supplication. It kind of transforms the physical act of washing into a spiritual testimony. You're reaffirming your faith and asking to be counted among those who are pure.
Okay, so you've achieved this state of purity. The next logical question is, what breaks it? How do you lose it?
So yeah, imagine you've just performed a perfect wudu. What are the specific things that can happen that basically hit the reset button, meaning you have to do it all over again before your next prayer? And this is where the details really matter. There's a lot of nuance. So for instance, anything exiting the private parts breaks wudu. But check this out. For bleeding, the blood has to actually flow beyond the cut. A tiny paper cut that just wells up with blood, that doesn't count. Similarly, sleep only breaks wudu if you're not sitting firmly on the ground. And get this, audible laughter only breaks it if it happens during the prayer itself.
Now we're going to shift gears to a really key principle in Islamic practice, which is ease and mercy. The faith isn't meant to be a huge burden, and this next topic is a perfect example of that.
This principle from the Quran is just perfectly demonstrated in the ruling of mus. So what is mus? It's an allowance to just wipe over your thick socks instead of having to take them off and wash your feet every single time you do wudu. Of course, there are some strict conditions to use this concession. First off, you have to have put the socks on while you were already in a state of purity from a full wudu. They also have to cover your ankles, be durable enough that you could walk in them, and be thick enough to keep water from seeping right through. So how long can you do this for? Well, if you're at home, you get 24 hours. If you're traveling, that time extends to a full 72 hours. And here's the kicker. The timer doesn't start when you put the socks on. It starts from the first time your wudu breaks after you've put them on. And that same idea of mercy extends to injuries. If you have a cast, a splint, or a bandage, you can just wipe over it for as long as it takes to heal. And you don't even need to have been in a state of purity when it was first applied. Finally, let's cover the complete ritual bath, which is known as ghusl. This is what's required for a state of what's called major ritual impurity.
So ghusl becomes mandatory in a few specific situations, like after sexual intercourse or for a woman after her menstrual cycle or postnatal bleeding ends. So you see, unlike wudu, which happens multiple times a day, Ghusl is performed only when one of these specific events occurs, and it brings a person back from a state of major impurity.
And for a ghusl to be valid, there are 3 absolute essentials. First, you have to rinse the mouth thoroughly. Second, sniff water into the nose. And third, the most critical part, you have to make sure that water washes over your entire body, leaving absolutely no spot dry.
Now, beyond when it's mandatory, doing ghusl is also highly recommended on special occasions. It's a great way to physically and spiritually prepare for big community prayers, like the weekly Friday prayer, the 2 Eid prayers, or before starting the pilgrimage for Hajj or Umrah.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, all these acts, from the daily wudu to the concession of mosh, all the way to the occasional ghusl, they're really all about preparation. They are structured, physical rituals designed to achieve a state of spiritual readiness to stand before God.
And that leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? How did these very structured physical acts of purification, repeated day in and day out, actually shape a person's internal spiritual awareness and mindfulness throughout their entire day?